So, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Nottingham Buddhist Centre online drop-in meditation, Tuesday, 4th of August. And we're still mostly having an online existence at the moment, which is working in lots of different ways. It's in some ways been very successful. But important weekend, we had some mitra ceremonies here where people were actually doing that in the building. That went really well. So it feels like we've hit a kind of milestone. Hopefully it will be something that we can build on. But it means that we've got actual people coming back to the centre in some way, even if it's just in quite a very small way at the moment. But it feels important, and that maybe we're going to get back to something else in the near future. So tonight's meditation is the Metta Bhavana, and it's a very classic sort of meditation within our tradition. So my name is Richard, by the way, and I live in the community here. If you come to the centre, you've almost certainly seen me around, and I've been practicing for about 5 years now, 6 years, something like that. And I've lived here for 5 of those years. Just a quick word about dana, generosity. As ever, we rely entirely on donations that people choose to give us. We don't have any other kind of income stream. So I just want to express some gratitude for all the help that we've been given during this lockdown period. As with all other organisations, it's been quite a tricky time, a lot of uncertainty. But people have really kind of stepped up and helped us out in lots of different ways, and particularly financially. So I just want to sort of express that gratitude, really. If you've given us anything at all, don't worry if you haven't, but if you have given us something, we're so grateful for that. It just really keeps us in existence, basically. So I won't say much about posture, because I guess that you kind of know what's good for you, and you know you're in your sort of home surroundings, if that's where you are, and you know what works for you probably. Just a couple of things. If you are in pain at the start of the meditation, and that's not pain that you normally experience as a result of something else, then it's probably best to try and fix that before you start meditating, whether that's to give yourself more support in some way, or change your posture completely maybe. But just try to deal with that before you start, because it'll only get worse. The same goes for instability in your posture. If you feel you're wobbling around a bit, your core muscles working hard to keep you upright, maybe have a look at that as well, because that will only become tiring and difficult. So it's probably best to try and have a look at that. So however you're sitting, if you feel that you can stay alert, but you can also relax, that's really what you're looking for in your posture. So if you've got that, then we're all good to go. So tonight is the Metta Bhavana. Metta means loving kindness, and Bhavana means to cultivate, bring into being. So it's a very traditional Buddhist meditation, practiced around the world for a very long time. And it does quite a lot of different things, really, I think. One thing that meditation can become a little bit heady, particularly in our culture. It sort of plays itself out as a technique, almost a psychological operation. And what the Metta Bhavana is doing is plugging us into something that's really quite different to that. It's plugging us into our emotional world, and plugging us into our attitude to the reality of other people. And that's really what this meditation is all about. It's about looking beyond your own self, your own sort of views of the world, your own ways of being. I suppose your own sort of little territory, if you know what I mean by that. It's about looking at something that may be completely different to that, and still having a very positive attitude towards that. So one thing that the Metta Bhavana does is that it transforms us in terms of our habits, in terms of how we relate to people. Because quite often the way we relate to people is actually based on a lot of habit. We've kind of always done things a certain way, maybe, so we just rely on them. And in some ways, we have to do that. I mean, life's so complicated, we probably wouldn't get away with not having some sort of routine or go-to sort of thing. But the downside of that is that we can get a bit stuck. We can think we know the world, we think we know other people, but we don't. It's as simple as that. So in some ways, when we do the Metta Bhavana, we're taking in a reality that's other than our own. And that's just a really crucial point, really. A lot of the suffering, according to the Buddha, that we experience is because we cling to our sense of self. We could try to maintain it at all costs, and that can leave us feeling maybe a bit oppositional, a bit defensive, but we're not always like that, obviously. But it means that we do have a certain way of being which sort of distances ourselves from the world, distances us from the people. So with that, metta is basically what's referred to sometimes as a wise emotion. It's more objective. It takes in this reality of other people, a reality that doesn't have this self-reference quite so much. And one thing that's also doing really is one thing that keeps this world going around in the Buddhist vision of things is greed, hatred, and delusion. Now, just to focus on, say, hatred, for example, it's just a very, very oppositional thing to be doing. It entrenches you, and entrenches your version of events and your view of the people. So hatred sounds quite strong, but in some ways it is a kind of deeper version of what's happening around you. Whereas the Metta Bhavana is a very, very deep identification with what's going on around you. And that doesn't really have a limit, which I think is really important. We can wish other beings well, we can wish them happiness and health and freedom and stuff like that. And there's no limit to how we can do it, how many times we can do it, how deeply we can do it. There's lots of different ways that it can become a limitless kind of a practice. So in some ways we can think of it as limitless. When we look at ourselves and separating ourselves off from the world, we're just creating limits around things that probably don't even really exist. We're all very reliant on others, as much as we maybe don't like to think that we are. We are very, very reliant on each other in all sorts of different ways. So it's very good to have a healthy relationship with that, rather than just almost be a bit resentful on the sly about it. And I can sometimes be a bit like that. I feel like I just want to be very independent sometimes and not have to rely on people. It's never going to happen because we all live in that world. We all have to rely on the people. So having a very positive regard for that relationship frees up a lot of energy in ourselves as well. One thing that also Metta does as well, when you start to build on Metta as a way of being alive in the world, your concept of what happiness is starts to shift around a bit. The classic example that we live in at the moment is materialism and consumerism. The more sort of goods we have, the more money we have, the more status we have, the happier we'll be. Doesn't seem to work like that, not in my experience anyway. We can get some happiness from some of that, but it always comes loaded with a bit of disaffection and so on. So what the Metta Bhavana is doing is tuning us into things that do have a lasting happiness. And it's up to you to really work that out in your meditation life and your life in general, really. If you do feel that this is the practice that you can really build on and work with, you may start to find that what makes you happy changes. And that's a really, really important insight to have, I think. Because it can shift around all sorts of things like your values, your way of relating to people, all of that sort of thing. So that's one of the main reasons that we do it, really. And with any meditation practice, it's not just something, in my opinion anyway, that you just bolt onto your life to make things work a bit better, although that can be how some people use it. Actually, what's happening is when you choose to meditate and build a meditation practice, you're committing to a path of transformation. Every time you meditate, you change something in yourself. And the more you meditate, the more you'll start to feel that momentum build up. So it's just worth sort of framing that in your mind maybe a little bit to say, well, actually, this is a path I'm walking down. It's not just a sort of technique that I'm working with. And that's just, for me, a very liberating way of doing things. So I'll take you briefly through the meditation, and then we can get started. So the meditation itself is about bringing people to mind, so it's quite an imaginative meditation. And it works in 5 stages. So the first person you bring to mind is yourself. The second stage is a good friend. The third stage is a neutral person. And the fourth stage is a difficult person. And then in the fifth and final stage, we bring all those people together, we start to equalise our feeling of goodwill towards them. And then we radiate that out into the world. So the first 2 stages are kind of self-explanatory, but there's a formula throughout this where basically we'll bring whoever it is to mind, ourselves, a good friend, or whoever it is. And then we just really try to tune into what happens when we bring that person to mind. Because something will be an immediate response, and that's a pretty real thing. If we can tune into that immediate, spontaneous response, it's not quite so clouded with how we think about it, if that makes sense. So just have a look at that. But I'll guide you through this, so don't worry too much. So you look at your initial response, and then what you're doing is you're choosing, you're actively, you're working with volition to bring, you're choosing to bring kindness, well-wishing, gentleness, however you want to look at that, towards that person. So you're having this positive relationship with this other reality. But you have to start with yourself. And it's very important in some ways. A meditation teacher recently said to me that you have to really start where you are, which might sound a bit obvious because where else are you going to start? But really, I think what I meant by that was is that you have to really be aware of your emotional state before you start meditating. Because otherwise you can get stuck in what is basically a fantasy. You're thinking that you're doing it, but it's not connected to the reality of what you're doing. You're sort of always trying to replace what's real with a set of ideas about being kind. But actually, it's trying to transform what's happening in you. That's what's really happening. Really try to tune in with the first thing that comes up. And when I say a neutral person, you bring a neutral person to mind, and then you start thinking that something will happen. And then you start to bring kindness to that, just to see what happens there. So the first 2 stages are pretty self-explanatory. The third stage, the neutral person, should be someone that you can get a good visual sense of, but it shouldn't be someone that you know at all, really. So that could be quite a large number of almost everybody's neutral, put it that way. We don't know almost everybody. So it could be someone that lives on the street, someone you maybe see in traffic or on public transport, works in a shop nearby. It could be someone you actually see all the time. Work is a good place for this. When you see them all the time, but you very rarely interact with them. You may not even know their name. So pick someone like that you can get a good sense of. The difficult person, sometimes called the enemy. Just try to pick someone where there's a little bit of tension or a bit of difficulty, something like that. Don't pick someone who's giving you a really, really difficult time over a long period of time, because that's probably going to be a bit too much to work with, at least at this stage anyway. So just pick someone there's a little bit of anxiety around. And try to pick someone that you know as well. Try not to pick someone who's, don't go for a politician or a celebrity you don't like, or something like that, because it's just too abstract, basically. You don't really know what they're like. And then the final stage, you bring all 4 people together, yourself, the good friend, the neutral person, the difficult person, and then you start to equalise this feeling of metta, loving kindness. And then we radiate out into the world, and then we finish. So we'll get started. We'll probably last about 25 minutes or so. And I'll just start with a short body scan just to get us into things a bit more. Get us out of our headspace to more into a body sort of space, really. So if you are ready, just gently close your eyes. As you do that, just notice what's really in the foreground of your experience. I mentioned earlier about being aware of where you're starting from. something will be there in the foreground. Could be a bodily sensation, could be a particular emotional tone. There could be a lot of thought, a lot of imagery. You may be feeling quite high energy at the moment. You may have a day that kind of energized you in some way. You might be feeling very drained and tired. All of this is just valuable information, valuable awareness about where you're starting from. So you can begin by just tuning into the sensation of the breath. The breath can be a good indicator of how we're feeling. We're a bit tense for some reason, a bit agitated. The breath can sometimes be shallow, a bit uneven, a bit irregular. If we're feeling quite focused already, maybe quite settled, quite relaxed, the breath might be quite deep, quite regular, quite even. You may be able to tune into its rhythm quite easily. So now we can tune into a sense of temperature in the body. Some parts of our body more warm than others. Some parts of our body will be covered with clothing. Some of the skin will be exposed to the air. Notice a sense of contrast there. Some parts of your body more relaxed than others. Just gently scan through your body for tension. We all have somewhere where we tend to hold tension in our body. Sometimes it can be around the mouth and the jaw, the forehead and eyes. For some people it's the hands, or around the shoulders and the neck. Just tuning into your bodily sensations. If you do find tension there, just try to relax and soften that part of your body. And I'm trying to notice the sense of contrast between the hard parts of your body and the soft parts of your body. And notice how the hard parts of your body structure you, keep you upright, keep you balanced, steady. And the soft parts of the body, you can tune into them. Feel the relaxation of the muscles. And now we can tune into our skin. And maybe quite a lot of signal from the skin here. Maybe around the face, the hands, feet. Noticing any sensations that change with the breath. we can focus a little more on our emotional tone. Where are we starting from at the moment? Don't worry if you feel maybe a bit angry, a little bit anxious. This is just where we're starting from. These are the kinds of things we want to transform. If you already feel relaxed, feel in a positive state, this is what we're looking to intensify. So now in the first stage, we bring ourselves to mind. And just notice the very first things that happen when you bring yourself to mind. What happens in the body? What happens to our feeling tone? There's a lot of story around who we are. Maybe you notice quite a mixed picture there. You may have quite a positive regard for yourself in some ways. Also, there may be some qualification here. So whatever it is that you found, you bring yourself to mind. You can start to cultivate an intention to be positive towards ourselves, kind, understanding. It may help you to use the phrases, may you be well, may you be happy, may you be free from suffering. Allowing that intention to unfold, to intensify. Just noticing what happens when we wish ourselves well. What effect is having this intention have? It may help to recall some of the simple acts of kindness that you do to yourself every day. Looking after yourself, acting in your own interests. These are all acts of kindness that are already happening. Choosing to do the Metta Bhavana is also one of these acts of kindness towards yourself. So now in the second stage, you bring to mind a good friend. Again, just notice what happens when you bring that person's mind. Feeling gladness, feeling warmth, whatever that is for you, just take in that sensation, what arises when this person enters your experience. Again, whatever it is that we find, we can choose to bring an intention towards that person. May they be well, may they be happy, may they be free from suffering. And here there may already be quite a bit of positive emotion. Just really tune into that feeling, become absorbed in it. And by becoming absorbed in it, you can intensify those feelings, strengthen them, make them more important in our lives. May they be well, may they be happy, may they be free from suffering. So now on the third stage, you bring to mind a neutral person. Should be someone that you don't know, you don't like them, you don't dislike them. But like us, you have hopes and dreams, fears and worries. And in some ways, you do that in another human like will. Again, just tuning into what's happening when you bring this person to mind. It may be that not much happens because you don't know them, and that's fine. Just tuning into whatever's there. And again, whatever we found, you can start to cultivate an intention. Maybe be well, maybe be happy, maybe be free from suffering. Now may be a good time to get a sense of contrast between how you were feeling at the start of the meditation and what's the effect of cultivating this intention. Be kind towards yourself, towards the good friend, towards the neutral person. What effect is this having on your body, your feelings, your mind? So now in the fourth stage, you bring to mind a difficult person. This could be someone who's a bit of tension with, it could even be a good friend. It should be someone you know. There's some sort of difficulty, friction, maybe a bit of a disagreement. And just tuning into how that person is making you feel at the moment. Again, as with the other stages, you start to bring intention to whatever arises there. Intention for this person to be well, to be happy, to be free from suffering. You may be well, you may be happy, you may be free from suffering. And now in the fifth and final stage, we bring together all four people, ourselves, good friend, neutral person, and the difficult person. Holding them in our minds, and just allowing matter to flow towards them without preference, without differentiation. Just as the sun will shine on those people. Just allow matter to radiate forth and start to include more and more people in this area. Radiate out our feeling of metta out into the house or wherever we are. Just to include the people in our immediate environment. Wishing them well, wishing them happiness and freedom. Expanding further, including the people on the streets around where we live. Expanding again over the city and town and village where you are. Wherever your mind can reach, and wish people well, wish them happiness, wish them freedom. Expanding further and further, wishing all beings well wherever they are. Having this unconditional, positive regard for other beings. Now we can start as we approach the end of the meditation, just bringing ourselves back into the room, back into our body. And again, just checking in with how differently you may feel now after having done this meditation. Even if the effects don't feel strong, meditation always has an effect of some kind. It may just play out over a longer period of time. It may not be immediately apparent right now. Just tuning back into the body, how you're feeling. Gently open your eyes and bring the meditation to a close. So thanks very much for joining us this evening, folks. So yeah, it's good to see you all. And this will be our regular routine for a while, and there will be a little bit of a relaunch coming up in the autumn, which is not too far away now. So we'll be doing things slightly differently, maybe a bit more variation in what we're doing. Yeah, so there'll be a lot more to engage with in the coming months. So do keep checking back in. And if you subscribe to our channel, you can just do these meditations whenever you feel like doing them. There's quite a library of meditations built up there now. And you can also tune in some of the talks that have been asked Sunday night as well, which have been very popular lately. So, as ever, just try to tune into how your meditation is playing out in the rest of your life. It will be doing that, whether you're aware of it or not. So do try to stay aware of your meditation outside of meditation, if that makes sense. And good luck with the week. I believe it's going to be Paul next week, so you've got to see me for a couple of weeks now. Rachel's back for Fridays and Karen Batcher. So I shall see you in a couple of weeks, and hope you have a good fortnight. Goodbye.